Spira has been purged of sin forever, and the eternal calm has begun. What happens to the cities and the population of Spira now the rebuilding after 1,000 years of sin commences? How will each city go about it? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I was coming up with some ideas for videos, and I came across a little bit of a theory. I feel like we haven't explored enough of what Spira would look like if it wasn't affected by sin's cycle of death. The game pretty much talks about how much sin has affected the state of the world, from the emergence of Yevon and the Summoners, and all the consequences that have come with it throughout Spira's history. At the end of Final Fantasy X, sin was destroyed forever, and Spira has finally entered its eternal calm. Of course, there is the events of Final Fantasy X-2, where Shuyin attempted to revive Vegnagun to exact revenge, and the audiobook that details the return of sin. However, for the sake of this video concept, we will completely scrap the audiobook and go with Sin never coming back to Spira again, which allows us to explore some different stories. For today's video, we will be focusing on the tiny little island of Besaid and how it can be rebuilt now that Sin is gone. Keep in mind, many cities, with a couple of exceptions, could not grow past a certain point because it would have lured Sin in and destroyed pretty much everything that the citizens have worked so hard to build. Now, Sin is gone, and the citizens no longer have that shadow looming over them of whether or not they will be attacked, so now they can freely rebuild. Keep that in mind when we explored Besaid. It was once a Machina city, as evident by the Machina ruins that were around the island during the events of Final Fantasy X. In fact, it was known to house summoners, so it is likely that there was a training facility for them in Spira's ancient past. However, we're going to have a different approach on how Besaid may be rebuilt. So sit back, relax, and tune in as we explore how Besaid rebuilds itself after Final Fantasy X-2. First, we have to establish how a possible governance might go in Besaid. Well, Besaid is a village, so it's likely that it's going to be ruled by an elder or a chief. For simplicity's sake, I think Waka would be the most suitable candidate for this position because of his contributions to defeating Sin permanently. So he would be someone that the population of Besaid would look up to. That's pretty much all I'm gonna cover in terms of governance because politics is a little too confusing to me. Plus, Besaid doesn't have enough people to have different branches of industries or institutions. I'm already confusing myself just thinking about it. The first thing we're going to look at when it comes to actually growing the city of Besaid is the geographical dot of the village on the map. Besaid is situated on an island which is not very big, so it's unlikely that Besaid can grow to the extent of Bevel or even Zanarkand from 1,000 years ago. But it is still worth growing. Besaid Island is pretty isolated compared to the rest of Spira, so the water surrounding it would provide ample opportunity to grow a fishing industry and the sea trade. Besaid could build ports for merchants and fishermen to trade with the other cities in Spira and would find initial growth there. This, in turn, would bring many people onto the island of Besaid and grow its population, allowing it to build more houses on the island. Now, because the influence of the Yevon religion is pretty much nullified after the events of Final Fantasy X, it may be wise to tear down the temple. However, as we learn from Final Fantasy X-2, the Chamber of the Faith serves as a link to the far plane, and a fiend outbreak has already occurred in the past, and just because Sin and Vegnagun are defeated, doesn't mean that the far plane is gone. In order to prevent any future outbreaks, I would turn the temple into a sort of barracks. However, some of the older citizens of Besaid may want to preserve the temple, especially the statues of the High Summoners, including Yuna. So it is likely that part of the temple will be allocated to preserving the statues or to create a new building to house them. I would also use the Crusader tent as either the governing building for the Elder or the place to store those statues that I had mentioned before. Now, when it comes to protection, how would we go about it? Well, we could revive the Crusaders and have them serve as the military force for Besaid, but I would go a slightly different route. I would establish friendly relations with the Al Bhed. Even though some people might protest this because of what they have grown up learning under the Yevon religion, the mechanical aptitude of the Al Bhed could serve to benefit Besaid's military forces and technological advances. Keep in mind that a lot of the strongest weapons that exist in Spira are of Al Bhed make, despite it being forbidden by the Yevon teachings. In addition to having the Al Bhed involved in the protection of Besaid, they could help with recovering old technological innovations, as well as creating new inventions. Now that Yevon has fallen, there is no more disdain towards the Al Bhed. Of course, we know that relations can't be fixed right away. This is a process that will take years to mend, but I think that this will serve to benefit both parties. When Tidus helped the Al Bhed recover the airship from an underwater ruins near Bodge Temple and the story of the sunken city in the Moonflow, that made me wonder, what other relics and artifacts of the past could we uncover from the waters throughout Spira? With this being considered, I would also allocate space for a storage building where Al Bhed could gather and store any artifacts and parts that they can find in the waters around Besaid, which would also mean having a port dedicated to this endeavor. There could even be an agreement where if there's anything that the Al Bhed can find that can serve to benefit Besaid in terms of everyday use and overall growth to the village, then they must do so. While this can apply to most cities outside of Besaid, because Besaid is surrounded by water, it has more mysteries to discover. Or, who knows, there may be nothing there. And this is where the risk of some sort of excavation or salvaging industry can be a bit of a double-edged sword. The amount of resources that it would require in order to excavate artifacts and parts underwater would be moderate, as Besaid would have no means in order to do that, which is why establishing friendly relations with the Al Bhed is imperative to getting this done. Even if the Al Bhed don't find anything of good use in the waters, they can still be helpful in other means. The vast waters of Spira are full of fiends, and much of Besaid's growth will rely on making sure that the ships used for fishing and trading are protected. So this is where having nearby battleships or repelling fiends led by the Al Bhed would prove to be helpful to Besaid. If any of the ships get destroyed, then it will be costly to build new ones for future use. Besides, if Waka can reconcile with Riku and accept her heritage as Al Bhed, then I am sure he has no problem convincing the population of Besaid to welcome the Al Bhed into their village. Without going too much further, I think the suggestions I would use to implement the growth and future of Besaid could serve as a strong foundation for any future opportunities. Between the fishing industry and merchant trade with the other cities, I think Besaid is in a good position to grow, to perhaps even become a city in its own right. Unlike Bevel and Zanarkand, Besaid has no nearby cities it could compete with in terms of growth and power, so it can pretty much grow at its own pace, and cities would have to travel some distance if they are to wage war with Besaid. Now, I know I unpacked a lot here, and it's not like Besaid would establish anything in the time span of days. A process this large could take years, if not decades, in order to implement everything I mentioned in this short video. And that, in a nutshell, is how I would approach growing the village of Besaid. This was certainly an interesting idea as I was making this video, but I like the ideas it presented. I was experimenting on this on another channel and it did decently well, so I hope you enjoyed it for this. There are other cities we can explore as well, or perhaps we can even explore regions to see if it is worth building cities there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel so you can see more Final Fantasy content. Other than that, this is Enzo signing out, and I will see you all soon.